Hello and welcome to Wavescan, the international DX program from Adventist World Radio. Researched and written in Indianapolis by Adrian Peterson and produced in the studios of WRMI in Okeechobee, Florida. I'm Jeff White. Today on Wavescan, tribute to shortwave WYFR, Part 9, on the air with WNYW, Radio New York Worldwide. Unusual QSL cards, metal, wood, and plastic, and our Bangladesh DX report. In our previous topic on the historical development of shortwave station WYFR, WRMI, we came up to the year 1967, during which Walter Lemon, the energetic entrepreneur who was associated with the earliest origins of the station back 40 years previously, passed to his rest. At the time, the station was on the air with 5 transmitters, 4 at 50 kilowatts and 1 at 80 kilowatts, under the new call sign WNYW, Radio New York Worldwide. 8 of the 11 antenna systems were still in use. Ray Robinson of KVOH takes up the story.
Thanks, Jeff. The previous year, 1966, was a year of massive expansion for shortwave station WRUL, with new studios, a new call sign, a projected new location, and a special shortwave receiver designed for mass production. During this same year, the mail response to the programming on shortwave WRUL was enormous, at 3,000 letters per month.
This is Radio New York Worldwide. During the next 15 minutes, music in the PM will be heard on 17.730, 11.970, and 15.440 megacycles. WRUL is owned and operated by the International Educational Broadcasting Corporation with transmitters in Scituate, Massachusetts, the United States of America. We now leave the air on 17.845 megacycles to return on 11.880 megacycles within the next 15 minutes by authority of the Federal Communications Commission.
4 years after Bonneville International in Salt Lake City, Utah had acquired shortwave station WRUL at Hatherley Beach, Massachusetts, they transferred the studio production to a new location. At this stage, CBS Radio had recently moved from its long-term lease at 485 Madison Avenue in New York City to its own new building nearby, and Bonneville took up the 3rd floor of the vacated building with 9 studios and 6 control rooms. The studios for the Bonneville FM station WRFM were also installed into this location, though their FM transmitter was atop the famed Empire State Building. Effective June 1st, 1966, the old shortwave call sign was dropped and the new call sign was adopted, and thus the historic WRUL became the new WNYW, reminiscent of the station's slogan, Radio New York Worldwide. A special QSL card was printed in honor of the occasion.
Ken Lamb along with you here at WNYW, and let me do this. This is WNYW with studios in New York City and transmitters in Scituate, Massachusetts, the United States of America. It's nice to have Mitch Levy sit with us here. Here's a letter from a guy who writes to us from, Leiden, is that how you'd pronounce it in Holland? Robert F. Brell is his name. And he says, since we changed the call letters to WNYW, this guy must be an old listener. He must go back for years and years.
WRUL, sure.
Yeah, he used to listen to the station when it was known as WRUL. I'm glad we changed the call letters. I like WNYW better. Yeah, he says, anyway, that he listens all the time. He sends a nice reception report. June Carter and Johnny Cash.
If I were a carpenter.
By arrangement with the Drake Radio Company in Miamisburg, Ohio, a special radio receiver was designed for sale to WRUL listeners. This was the WRUL Drake SW4, which was subsequently modified into the SW4A version. It is known that 600 SW4s were constructed before the updated SW4A was introduced. In this same year, 1966, plans were announced for a new shortwave station which would be located on the Jersey Barrens near Chatsworth, New Jersey. The 40-acre site at Hatherley Beach was just too small and too old.
The sound of music and news. WNYW.
It's a worldwide fraternity of thousands. Why not find out more about it today?
Write for your free sample copy of the Club Bulletin. Write Listeners Club, WNYW, New York, 10022. The Radio New York Worldwide Listeners Club invites you to discover a new dimension in shortwave listening. Membership in the club is limited to those outside the United States.
Wherever you go, you can listen to the news. You can swing with the blues on this wonderful, wonderful station. Just take a lively companion wherever you go. Take a portable radio. Take a portable radio.
It was intended that the new site, with its 735 acres, would contain 5 transmitters, 2 at 250 kilowatts, 1 at 100 kilowatts, and 2 at 50 kilowatts, together with a bevy of curtain and rhombic antennas. The FCC issued a construction permit for the new station, and work at the new site began around mid-year 1966. However, all of the majestic expansion plans that were laid out in 1966 went up in smoke during the following year, 1967. There was a disastrous fire of suspicious origin at the Hatherley Beach facility on Sunday morning, April 9th, 1967, and none of the original WRUL electronic equipment survived.
Hi everyone, this is Steve Silverstein, and on this week's DXing Worldwide, a whole host of special news items, and John Lowry's here to tell us about the new Radio New York Worldwide frequencies.
Work had already begun on the new facility at Chatsworth, and Bonneville announced that the new station would be quickly completed and activated later in the same year. However, instead, work on the new Chatsworth station was actually terminated, and the Hatherley Beach station was rebuilt. During the interim period, Radio New York Worldwide, WNYW, took out a temporary relay from 2 other shortwave locations. Shortwave historian Jerome Berg of suburban Boston tells us in his informative volume, Broadcasting on the Shortwaves, 1945 to Today, that the WNYW programming was transferred to RCA Rocky Point and to ITT Brentwood, both of which were located on Long Island in the state of New York.
The sound of music and news. WNYW.
Don't guess when your favorite radio station is on the air. There's an easier and more convenient way to find out the schedules of thousands of long, medium, and shortwave radio stations in more than 200 countries throughout the world. It's the new 1969 edition of the World Radio and Television Handbook. You can purchase the World Radio TV Handbook now for just $5.95 surface mail in Europe and North America, or $7.95 airmail anywhere in the world. Send your order now to Handbook, WNYW, New York 10022, USA.
This new and temporary fill-in relay began during the next week after the fire on April 17, 1967. This interim procedure was in effect for about 4 months, ending somewhere around August when the rebuilt facility at Hatherley Beach was reactivated with a whole consignment of new equipment. In the rebuilding program, it is stated that truckloads of new transmitter equipment from both Continental and Gates began to arrive at the Hatherley Beach station. When the new WNYW was activated, it is stated that the complement of new transmitters was 3 at 100 kilowatts, 2 at 50 kilowatts, and 1 at 20 kilowatts. Programming for the new station, WNYW at Hatherley Beach, was compiled in the studios of FM station WRFM in New York City and forwarded on tape to Hatherley Beach. CBS news bulletins and occasional feature programs were provided live via landline from WRFM New York to WNYW Hatherley Beach.
This is All American Radio, WNYW, New York.
This is CBS News. Soviet Communist leader Brezhnev charges China is breaking away from the communist movement. It's the eve of President Nixon's conference with South Vietnam's President Tu. The president's scheduled to leave for Honolulu in half an hour.
In the early 1970s, shortwave station WMIW was placed on the market for sale. One of the early inquiries came from the Far East Broadcasting Company, who were already operating major shortwave stations KGEI from San Francisco and FEBC from Manila in the Philippines. Bonneville International also offered to sell the station to the Voice of America for just $1, but VOA did not take them up on the offer. Another inquiry came from Family Radio at Oakland in California. They were already providing programming to the station for 16 transmitter hours daily, beginning January 22, 1973. Then, on October 20th of that same year, 1973, the station changed hands and shortwave WMIW at Hatherley Beach, Massachusetts, with studios in New York City, became WYFR with studios in Oakland, California. At the time of the transaction, the WMIW schedule shows the following transmitters. WMIW 2 and 3, both at 100 kilowatts, made by Gates, and WMIW 4 and 5, both at 50 kilowatts, one each, made by Continental and Gates. It is presumed that WMIW 1 was the 20 kilowatt standby transmitter made by either Continental or Gates. Apparently this lower powered transmitter had been removed sometime prior to the transfer from Bonneville to Family Radio.
Calling Dublin, Milan, Madrid, Montevideo, Guatemala City, Paramaribo, Alcantara, Kinshasa, and Tangier. This is WNYW, New York. The international affiliate of CBS.
You're listening to Wavescan from Adventist World Radio. Send your comments and reception reports to Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229 in the United States. That's Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229 in the USA. Or you can email us at wavescan@awr.org. Our email once again, wavescan@awr.org.
Thank you, Ellen Graham. Back many moons ago, we presented a special feature here in Wavescan about unusual QSL cards, which were made from various forms of paper and printed card, thick and thin, including blotting paper and parchment paper. Then, too, there were regular QSL cards that had been treated with oil and with varnish. Over the years, other materials have also been used in the production of QSLs, including rice, birch bark, and Pacific tapa cloth. We should not forget, too, that the QSL text has been printed on currency notes, including Japanese occupation money. In our program today, we look at other materials that have been used to make QSL cards, including various metals, wood, and plastics. At least 4 different radio stations in the United States have used a copper sheet in place of a thin card as an official QSL to verify reception of their station. 3 of these stations, all medium wave, are located in the state of Montana, where there have been several notable copper mines. During the 1940s, when the copper QSL cards were available, these 3 stations were highly prized DX targets for international radio monitors living in New Zealand. These 3 stations were KGIR in Butte, Montana, on 1340 kilohertz with 1 kilowatt, KPFA in the city of Helena on 1210 kilohertz with a quarter kilowatt, and KRBM in Bozeman, Montana at 1420 kilohertz with 1/4 of a kilowatt. The 4th radio station that issued a copper sheet QSL card during the same 1940s era was an amateur station, W6SCV, in Tucson, Arizona. This QSL card showed a hand-painted picture of a Western cowboy with his donkey, and the QSL text was typed in with the use of an old-style typewriter. A large tin-plated generic-style QSL card was available several years ago for use by amateur radio operators who lived in the town of Weirton, West Virginia. This unique QSL measured 8 inches by 5 inches, and it advertised Weirton as the tin plate capital of the world. 2 different varieties of this generic QSL card were available, though they were quite similar in style. An oversized amateur QSL card from 1947 was issued by an international radio monitor living in the town of Mountain Iron, Minnesota. This QSL card measured 7 inches by 4 3/4 inches, and the QSL text was printed in the usual ham style on regular thin card. However, attached to the card was a small sample of crushed iron ore taken from the Mountain Iron open pit mine. This card was issued by Bob Ostman with the self-identification call sign W0SWL. At least 3 different forms of wood have been used for the production of a radio station QSL card. In 1958, amateur station HC1CW in Quito, Ecuador, had his QSL card made out of thin balsa wood. Balsa wood is very light and quite fragile. In 1992, a radio listener who was holidaying in Alaska bought a tourist postcard made of plywood. Upon it, he rubber-stamped the generic QSL text together with a rubber-stamped impression of his home address. This QSL card was enclosed with a reception report to the distant medium-wave station KICY in Nome, Alaska. The card was duly signed and posted in Nome, though it was spoiled in transit through the postal system, and it was received in a plastic envelope apologizing for the damage to the card. Back in the year 1999, the European staff of Adventist World Radio staged an anniversary convention in Portugal, celebrating a significant milestone in AWR history. 5 different styles of tourist cards were procured, each bearing a different colored picture of a tourist scene in Portugal. These cards were all printed on thin sheets of cork, the same size as a regular postcard. A QSL sticker was adhered to the address side, and they were used to verify reception reports of the special anniversary programming on the air from Portugal. Cork is harvested from the inner bark of the cork oak tree. Portugal provides half of the world's supply of commercial cork. Hard plastic was used for the production of a QSL card, issued by amateur station WB5SGY in Dallas, Texas. This card is formed in the shape of the state of Texas, and it was issued to another amateur operator in the United States, K3ASV. Unfortunately, this hard plastic QSL card was also damaged in transit through the postal system. It was actually snapped into 2 separate pieces. A ribbed plastic card was used by Radio Netherlands in 2012 to verify the reception of their programming via the transmitter facility on the island of Bonaire in the Caribbean. This card is a tourist postcard, and it shows a windmill scene in Holland. The clear ribbing over the picture makes the entire scene look 3-dimensional. The QSL text was printed onto a sticker, which was then applied to the back of the card. Back more than half a century ago, there was a pirate station on the air in New Zealand. When the station was raided by the authorities, the operator wrote a QSL text onto a standard 78 gramophone record and gave it to one of the officers. This unique QSL has since become an interesting historic item. You're listening to Wavescan from Adventist World Radio. Let's go now to Salahuddin Dolar in Bangladesh with his DX News.
Dear listeners and radio hobbyists, welcome you in the April edition of Bangladesh DX Report in Wavescan. This is Salahuddin Dolar from the beautiful city Rajshahi, Bangladesh. Glad to be back and thanks for listening. Let's start. Receiving log of different radio stations. All the time mentioned here in UTC. 28th March. Voice of America at 1825 to 1830. in Portuguese on 13630 kHz. The SIU code was 333. 29th March, BBC at 1815 to 1820 in Somali on 5935 kHz. The SIU code was 444. BBC at 1820 to 1825 in Dari on 5910 kHz. The SIU code was 333. March 30, Bangladesh Betar at 1300 to 1330 domestic service on 4750 kHz. The SIU code was 444. April 1st, Radio Veritas Asia at 1400 to 1430 UTC in Bangla on 11870 kHz. The SIU code was 444. 2nd April, Radio Thailand at 000 to 0130 in English on 15590 kHz. The SIU code was 444. Deutsche Welle at 800 to 830 in Pashto on 17800 kHz. The SIU code was 333. April 3rd, Radio Japan at 1300 to 1345 in Bangla on 11685 kHz. The SIU code was 444. Deutsche Welle at 2000 to 2030 in English on 11800 kHz. The SIU code was 333. April 4th, Trans World Radio India at 00130 to 00145 in Bangla on 7280 kHz. The SIU code was 333. Radio Saudi Arabia at 1200 to 1230 in Bangla on 15120 kHz. The SIU code was 333. April 5th, Radio Free Asia at 0100 to 0130 in Burmese on 15700 kHz. The SIU code was 333. Radio Tehran at 1020 to 1100 in English on 17640 kHz. The SIU code was 444. April 13, ECG Media Radio at 1230 to 1300 on 13720 kHz. The SIU code was 333. If you have any comments or suggestions, please send your message to dxbangla@gmail.com. Okay, I will come with more DX news in the next edition. Till then, take care. Salahuddin Dollar, Rajshahi, Bangladesh.
Thanks, Salahuddin. And just before we go today, we have an update on the NASB, National Association of Shortwave Broadcasters, 2014 annual meeting, which will be taking place at the IBB, International Broadcasting Bureau transmitting station, that is the Voice of America station, in Greenville, North Carolina, on Thursday and Friday, May 15th and 16th. This is a meeting that's open to all shortwave listeners and shortwave broadcasters as well. You can attend and you can see for yourself this Edward R. Murrow transmitter site, the Voice of America site, the last shortwave site of the Voice of America, located inside the United States territory, in the continental U.S. anyway. There's going to be a tour of the site. Also, Kim Elliott, the audience research officer at the Voice of America in Washington, will be there to talk about his VOA radiogram experiments. You may have heard about these experiments transmitting messages in different modes that are often used by amateur operators, for example, in order to get through interference. Also, on Thursday, May 15th, a focus on advertising and educating the public about shortwave radio. Presentation by Brady Murray, the president of NASB and operations manager of WWCR. He'll have a panel discussion following his talk. Then Madagascar World Voice, some positive news from Charles Caudle of World Christian Broadcasting. We'll talk about WRMI's recent move from Miami to Okeechobee, Florida. Some pictures of that facility. Also an update on what's happening at KVOH in Los Angeles by John Taylor, president of the Strategic Communications Group. DRM will be on the agenda at the NASB meeting, and DRM Topics by Christopher Rumbaugh of the DRM North America Yahoo Group, and also Calvin Carter of Continental Electronics. They'll share some of their experiences with DRM and talk about DRM experimentation and listening in general. Jerry Plummer, frequency manager of WWCR in Nashville, will talk about antenna codes and their impact on broadcaster target markets in worldwide propagation mapping. On Friday, May 16th, there will be another talk by Jerry about shortwave radio in Germany from 1932 to 1945, and a panel discussion on the future of shortwave. So we'll go from the past to the future. Panel discussion on the future of shortwave, moderated by Jerry, with panel members from WWCR, World Christian Broadcasting. Dal Chow of Adventist World Radio, the president of AWR, will take part in that panel discussion as well. So a lot of things. That's just some of what's going to be happening on May 15th and 16th at the IBB Voice of America transmitting station in Greenville, North Carolina. You're invited. It's totally free. You'll even get a free lunch out of it, and you just have to get there on your own and stay there on your own. But if you'd like more information, you can look at the webpage of the NASB, which is www.shortwave.org, and then click on Annual Meeting, and you'll find all of the details there. That's www.shortwave.org, and then click on Annual Meeting. And we'll be there as well, and we look forward to meeting many of you there in Greenville, North Carolina. Thanks for listening to Wavescan, the international DX program from Adventist World Radio. We end today's edition of the program with some Rhythms of Africa from Channel Africa Shortwave in Johannesburg. This program was researched and written in Indianapolis by Dr. Adrian Peterson. Next week on Wavescan, the Philippine Radio Story, Part 8, the Japanese Era, and our Australian DX report from Bob Padula. A reminder that we have 2 QSL cards available for your reception reports on this program, one from AWR, another from WRMI. You can send your reception reports to Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229, USA. That's Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229, USA. Our email address is wavescan@awr.org. That's wavescan@awr.org. I'm Jeff White at WRMI in Okeechobee, Florida. Till next week, good listening, everyone.